Welcome, everyone. I'm really looking forward to this conversation. We have a brilliant group of panelists that with a wide variety of backgrounds. And so I think this is going to be a really interesting conversation about the future of college sports, which frankly, nobody has a magic ball to tell us where we're heading. But there are some very interesting ideas and some very interesting people who are going to share their thoughts. And so I want to start by, I guess, introducing myself. I'm Maddie Salamone. I'm an attorney and athlete advocate. I chaired the Student Athlete Advisory Committee to the NCAA while I was in school, and I played lacrosse at Duke, and have been involved kind of in this ever evolving world of the shifting landscape of college sports, and trying to figure out how to kind of land in a good place. So I want to start though by having each of our panelists introduce themselves. So I will go from my screen, and we'll start with David Ridpath.
Hi, Maddie, and thanks to Culture and Sports and Jeremy and Bob and Anna for having me on the panel. And thanks to you, Maddie. Always great being on a panel with you and my esteemed colleagues and partners in this effort that are on the panel. And stay safe, Maddie. If people don't know, Maddie's down in Florida right now, but a little bit inland. So hopefully she's okay. Where I come at this is, I'm a former Division I wrestling coach and former longtime college administrator who believed in the system that the NCAA touted for over 100 years about the so-called student athlete, education being at the forefront, athletics being an extracurricular activity or co-curricular that helped, build, great young men and women. And I'm not saying that can't be part of it, but reality is certainly not that. And I come at this really from two real perspectives of reframing the educational relationship and how that's going to work going forward. And then from the athletes' rights perspective, I've really become a convert in that the athletes are certainly, while not officially employees, if you treat someone as an employee, you should give them all rights and responsibilities that employees have. And I don't think at the end of the day that's going to change things too much. I'm about 70 miles southeast from Columbus, Ohio right now, and that stadium, under any circumstances, will be full for any football game, whether athletes are paid, whether they're not paid, whatever it may be, revenue share. So I think that the industry goes forward for the most part, regardless of what we do. And I think we need to treat the athletes fairly. And then we can look at the other things that we can do, other alternative models, which is kind of my third prong, alternative models of sport development going forward in America and how we do that from the grassroots level up to the Olympic development level. So those are the three ways that I come at this conversation, Maddie.
Awesome. Well, really happy to have you here. And I do want to also mention Bob Bolin is standing by just in case there are any issues with electricity or Wi-Fi, because I am in the state of Florida, and I would ask that if you can spare some prayers for the state overall. It's going to be a very serious storm, and so. But I'm very grateful to be able to be here with everybody, and for Bob for standing by in case there's any issue. But I'll go to Michael next.
Hey, Maddie, thanks for hosting this. And I appreciate the fact that you're in Florida, and I hope everyone makes it through this. It'll be a messy affair, hopefully not as bad as North Carolina. My background is I served as regent, a regent at the University of Minnesota for 6 years. And starting in 2015 was the NLRB petition by Northwestern University, and went through a whole bunch of other things, including a boycott of the Holiday Bowl game in 2016, hiring athletic directors and coaches, and arguments that persisted during the pandemic, where we learned that college athletes, especially basketball and football players, are essential workers. I think a lot of people have forgotten that. I worked against the Big Ten's decision to not play football that year. In fact, we were told that we were going to lose $70 million if we didn't participate in football. But the SEC persisted, and I argued that we should have a good reason to not play football. And in fact, I was not given a reason how our president was involved in the decision to cancel football that year. And it was an interesting kind of process, because as a trustee of a member university, we were given no information as to how that happened. And in the end, we did play football. We played 8 games, and we were paid $42 million through our TV rights deals, and it saved us. We only had a $25 million loss that year. So those were interesting things that I was involved with. And finally, the cutting of 3 men's sports because of Title IX and revenue shortages during 2020 was also an interesting process, where I learned a lot about Title IX and the budgets associated with the non-revenue teams. After leaving the board, I got involved with Athletes' Rights, helping to form football and basketball players associations. And it was there at the College Basketball Players Association that we filed 5, I guess it's now 5 NLRB charges for unfair labor practices and the misclassification of college athletes as student athletes with no rights. So anyway, I've been following everything since then, and it's an interesting time, and I look forward to commenting on what the future holds for athletics.
Thanks, Michael. We'll go to Christina next.
Greetings all. Excited to be here. Thank you to everyone for having me here today. Maddie, as a native Floridian, wishing you the best through this. Hurricanes always are, you never know. So best of luck. Did reach out to family. They seem to be okay, but yeah. Excited again to be here. My name is Christina Diaz. I serve as the Senior Associate AD and SWA at Monmouth University. We are in the Coastal Athletic Association and on the shore in Jersey. Just finished up and wrapped up a year here. So very different experience as I entered in August 2023, and highly recommend everyone to take a new position in higher ed outside of the start of the semester, but can't always get to choose that. I bring in I think a unique perspective in that I was a student athlete at the University of Florida. I had the opportunity to play for Mary Wise, a legend in the volleyball world, played at a high level and got to compete at a high level as a walk-on, eventually earned a scholarship there. So I truly believe in that system. I think it gives us a great opportunity to learn. So the walk-on, the scholarship student athlete, went into coaching, was a gym rat myself, so loved being in the practice setting. So, and then eventually, a little bit sooner than I wanted, but worked myself into administration. So bringing some different perspectives in my current role as a senior level administrator, and I do believe in higher ed. I'm a lifelong learner. I think this is a great opportunity that we continue to have to build leaders. And what you learn as a student athlete, what you learn as a coach, what you learn as an administrator, there's so many facets in life that help you prepare for that decision making that you're going to have to do. So I know the landscape right now is very rocky, and many don't see this as an opportunity, but for me, I do see it that way. I think we have the front seat to be able to positively impact what our future looks like. And I think we've been in this space before, and we're here today, and then we have another opportunity to really change and impact not only the student athletes that are here, but those that are going to be here 5, 10, 15, 20 years. And that's how I'm a glass is half full kind of girl, and we can keep refilling it. So maybe the annoying person in the room, but that's definitely going to be me. So apologize for those. I think we can probably have a balance across the room for that. But excited to be here, and looking forward to hearing and taking lots of notes from the fellow colleagues on this call. Thanks, Maddie.
Thank you. And we always need the glass half full people. Sabrina, if you want to go next. and welcome everyone.
Thank you, Maddie. Hi, everybody. I'm Sabrina Osberg. I'm a current collegiate Division I athlete at Belmont University in Nashville, Tennessee, specifically in hammer throw, so track and field. Where I come at the angle of NIL is that I have a background of doing NIL pre-NIL. I was a quadruple sport high school athlete, doing lots of different sports, but one of my primary sports was Olympic weightlifting. And I decided that if I wanted to compete at a higher level, I needed money to go travel around and do that. And so I actually raised sponsorships to travel around the nation to go compete in Olympic weightlifting and ended up becoming Tennessee state champion for Olympic weightlifting. And then I went to college and I was recruited for track and field. And then I realized as I entered my freshman year of college with NIL being passed, it's the same thing just for a different sport. So then I applied everything I learned from Olympic weightlifting over to track and field. And as I talked to lots of my different colleagues, they told me, well, it's just there. No one really knew how to navigate it. And so I utilized everything I learned in the past couple of years to help myself get over 20 plus deals with brands such as Sport Illustrated, Meta, CVS, First Forum, just to name a few. Work with quite a few agents. And so I really saw such a niche in the market in the sense that I was receiving all the information from someone who is still a current collegiate athlete. And I saw what has not been done yet. So I decided to start my own company called NIL Roadmap, where I help high school student athletes with their name, image, likeness, specifically with social media strategy and personal branding.
Great. We're excited to have your perspective and been following some of your journey as well. So thanks for being here. Julie, if you want to go next.
Yes, thank you, Maddie. And thank you to Culture and Sports and Bob and Anna and Jeremy for having us. I come at this similar, we were laughing last night, both Dave and Michael and I, it's like a Drake Group working group meeting because we're all three members of the Drake Group working group. So this is also fun in that aspect and to join all of you. Similar to Dave, I come at it with a little bit of my background. I grew up in a small town in Ohio. And it may sound funny, but swimming is what got me out of that small town. And I went to the University of Texas at Austin. I was a swimmer there, happened to be there during Don Piano, who many regard as a gender equity pioneer, and she is. So I saw that leadership from the women's athletics department, which was separate at the time. Only two schools were, Iowa and University of Texas, and I don't think there's any more. So I had that sensibility coming out of college about how important it was to have leaders like that in large schools, and I'm sure smaller schools. But from similar to Dave, I come at it from an educational focus and maybe redefining that relationship and trying to help college athletes. That's what we do at the Drake Group. We initially came out as advocates for athletic and academic integrity in college sports, certainly athletes' rights. And I also, think it's important to make sure that we're on a path of creating something that's not just sustainable, but legal, right? Not just from an antitrust standpoint, but from a discriminatory standpoint with regards to gender equity and other protections. I'm also interested in sports betting and protecting athletes' health and well-being and other regards. And I think for where we are now, gender equity is still going to be a really big issue for both athletes and coaching, women coaches. I think it's safe to say that women, both athletes and coaches, have never been given what they have. They've always had to fight for it. And certainly that's still where we are now, even with the ongoing House settlement that I'm sure we'll talk about. So I don't want to take up too much time, but I'm excited for this talk.
Thanks, Julie. All right, Karen, you're our last one.
Sure. Well, everybody, I'm thinking about the folks in Florida. Maddie, I know you're our representative, but it's a very difficult thing to watch a state go through this multiple times. So my thoughts and definitely my prayers are with everybody. I'm currently in Denver right now, and I'll talk a little bit more about why I'm in Denver in a minute. But I have a unique background. I spent 15 years as a head coach in Division I and Division III as a field hockey coach. Then I spent 15 years as an athletic director, Division I, Division III. And now I'm a faculty member at the University of Pennsylvania. And my path changed when I took the executive doctorate program at the university, where one of my classmates was Patrick Leahy, who, Christina, I think is your college president, who I think is a tremendous guy. That program opened my door and my eyes to a huge gap in the marketplace for college presidents. They really did not have an understanding about college athletics, oftentimes until they just sat in the chair. And for most of us who need to learn, learning on the job is tough. So, along with my colleagues in Exec Doc and in the Graduate School of Education, today I teach in the Exec Doc program to current and future college presidents. I work with master's students who want to work in higher ed. I have a podcast called Trustees and Presidents Managing Intercollegiate Athletics. I write for Forbes about the intersection of college athletics and higher education. And I have 2 books coming out next year. The first one is called my second edition of Sport Finance, Where the Money Comes From and Where the Money Goes. And the second one is a manual for college presidents on college athletics. Thanks for having me.
I appreciate you being here, and you're a great resource for information about anything going on in college sports. So um, I'd like to kind of kick it to the panel, and we'll go in reverse order, I think. But we've been in this ever-changing landscape in college sports over the past few years. Many of you alluded to in your introductions, between the evolution of NIL, conference realignment, antitrust cases, unfair labor claims with NLRB, claims under the FLSA, and now, of course, the amended House settlement, and the possibility of bringing in private equity and venture capital to college athletics. So there are a lot of different ways that we can look at this period of time. Period of time for opportunity. Great uncertainty. But I'd like each of you to kind of talk about where you think we are right now, where we're headed, and how do we sort of ensure that athletes are put in the best position when the dust settles. And Karen, I know that you were you were on a panel yesterday that was talking specifically about private equity, and those sort of possibilities as well. So if you want to start.
Sure, be happy to. So I'm currently in Denver. I was invited to participate on a panel about sports and private equity. This conference has never discussed college sports before. It is always about public-private partnerships. And it was quite an interesting event because there were about 150 presidents and vice presidents in the room, as well as media members. And we talked about things like, how are universities addressing this dynamic environment? How are they using other public-private partnership models to think about college sports? We had a gentleman on the panel who talked about the current sports partnerships market. We had an antitrust and private equity lawyer who talked about the deals that are being done globally. And then we talked a little bit about how private equity might work in a highly regulated environment like college athletics. Many of our universities are state. They have state legislatures who have an interest. They have boosters that have an interest. So it's a different environment. But it was a robust discussion because, as some of you may have heard, yesterday, this thing came out called Project Rudy, which was a deal that a Smash Capital has proposed to a number of conference commissioners, a number of college athletic directors, of potentially $9 billion coming in to solve some of the problems in college athletics with revenue. So we talked briefly about that, and we took a lot of questions from the audience. So with that, I'll leave it there.
I appreciate it. And actually, I want to go to Michael to talk about, what are some of your thoughts? Obviously, the issue of private equity has come up and venture capital being invited into college athletics. Feel free to also share your thoughts about where we are and where we're headed. But I want to bring you in as someone who, you know, looks more at the finances of college athletics and sort of how that all kind of works together.
Well, thanks for asking me that question. First of all, we know that the House settlement, has moved to has gained preliminary approval. And then, so we're looking at a 6-month window of kind of whether or not that's going to go through. And the goal is to get it through before next fall. And there's obviously a thirst for capital, a thirst for money in the college sports world. I focus mostly on the Power Four. And I think that depending on how everybody engages with the House settlement, we're looking at basically 3 to 5 years, and the game's going to be over for everybody. We're going to know who the powerful schools are. There are going to be a smaller number of power schools than there are today. And everyone's going to be looking for money. So the question is, where does venture capital and private equity come in? My personal view is a school would be crazy to engage in that, because the people that are involved in these types of enterprises are just looking for a return, and they're looking for huge returns, not just, interest rate, percentages. They're looking for multiple, times their money. And I think that the biggest problem is that college presidents are not suited to make these kinds of deals. And college and university trustees need to get more engaged in kind of what's happening today, because right now I think a lot of trustees are disengaged. Well, maybe not now, but within the last couple of years, I think everybody's starting to pay more attention to what's going on. But the bottom line is the private equity and venture capital guys and gals, they don't care about college athletics. They just want to make a return on their money. So they're not going to be thinking about the things that most people traditionally have thought of as it pertains to college athletes. And I would just add that there are a lot of ways, especially for the wealthy private universities and the public universities, the flagship universities. They can get capital at very low rates because their credit ratings are so good. And so I think that anybody looking for private equity money is a little bit crazy. And last thing I'll say is that Project Rudy, I kind of had to laugh because I'm scratching my head thinking, why did they call it Project Rudy? And I was thinking Project Mary would be better, as in Hail Mary, because everyone that's not in the top tier of the Power Four, let's say, is really looking for a way to equalize things. And Project Rudy doesn't even equalize things in terms of money, because they still have tiers inside there. So it would just be more of the same. And the SEC and the Big Ten would be crazy to engage in anything like that, because they've already won and they're going to continue winning. And when I say winning, they're going to continue bringing in more resources. Whether or not they deploy the resource, I'll leave it at that. Thanks.
I appreciate it. And I think I share your sentiment, and having some pause about inviting in private equity, who certainly will want a certain level of control. I think we see that in different industries where private equity does take over, and there are positive and negative implications, and perhaps in the long term, some of the short term benefits may or may not be worth it. But you alluded to some of the smaller universities, so I actually want to toss it to Christina to the extent that you're able, talk about what some of the conversations have maybe been on your campus. Obviously, there's going to be a tremendous impact if the House settlement does gain final approval. It's obviously gotten preliminary approval, and there are smaller universities potentially will bear the brunt of a lot of the damages in this case, and obviously be impacted in ways that are very different than some of the bigger schools.
Sure. Thanks, Maddie. Yeah, we've got change ahead, and I think the experience on campus. So I would relate that to we are in the trenches, and even within the trenches, we've got different spots where we've got our student athletes and our coaches experiencing this recruiting cycle. And as we share across campus, as we are recruiting in years in advance, but we have changes coming, and so we still are in this space of we don't have all the answers right now. But what we can do is try to strategize as much as possible and finding new ways to be creative with resources. How are we redefining what we do? What we have done in the past we can't sustain that. And so bringing as many diverse perspectives to the table to it shouldn't just be our top leaders that are having these conversations. How do we get some unique perspectives from, I would encourage a track and field coach that is traditionally, I know Sabrina is our track and field athlete, so I didn't just do that because you're on this call. That was on my notes. But I think, that's a different perspective, the style of of their season and how they compete and they're counted and all of the pieces and perspectives that track and field bring to athletics, to your basketballs and footballs that are almost always highlighted first and foremost. Those are the programs that teams are thinking of. So I think overall we have to take a step back and try and strategize as much as possible, understanding we are going to have creative solutions to these complex problems in a timely manner, and that is the first part, while maintaining our mission of we are here to grow and build leaders. And if we can, as a small institution, knowing that's our standard, those are our foundations, that's our building blocks. Okay, let's get to work and finding ways to, if it is revenue generation, if it is changing what we've always done in the past 15 years, and that's not unique to college athletics. That's the reality for higher ed right now. How do we continue to be good partners on campus, off campus, within the community? To me, that's been the standard for small institutions like ourselves, and we need to sustain that moving forward.
Do you think that this is maybe an opportunity for schools to really hone in on what their values are and maybe stop trying to compete with the big schools if that's not really in line with their mission? Could this be also seen as sort of that opportunity to figure out where we go moving forward, what model makes sense for different levels?
Sure, Maddie. I mean, you're a Division I student athlete. Asking us to put aside our competitive nature is quite challenging, but I think it does, right? We have to, in terms of getting to the table and saying, okay, we want to compete, and what is our level of competition that we can sustain for this 3 to 5 year time frame that maybe Michael is saying that we have, or is it the foundations of a unique institution like Penn that is an Ivy League school that has been doing this for a long time, and how they kind of set their standard? There's some institutions that I think have those foundations that those values are set, and I don't know if those are going to change. For a unique institution like ours, that's a mile from the beach. That is, we just changed our conference. We're now in year 3 in the Coastal Athletic Association. I think that change should be part of the conversation. Our value is, how are we adapting and how are we making positive change to the students and student athletes that we recruit. So I would encourage the conversation of putting that competitive nature kind of a little bit to the side. It's what makes us great, but understanding we've got to bring more to the table in that.
Yeah, it definitely, I think it's a time of tremendous change, and it's going to take a lot of creative solutions. Sabrina, I'm wondering from your perspective, you're a current athlete. When I speak to athletes, I get a mix of people who are really engaged and some who have absolutely no idea what we're even talking about when we talk about a house settlement. And I know personally the experience of being an athlete, sometimes you're not paying attention to what the rules are even until you're affected by them, or you're heavily involved in trying to influence them or give feedback. So I'm wondering, from your perspective, what sorts of things are you seeing? what do you think is going well right now, whether it's in NIL or in other areas? And where do you think that this sort of enterprise of college athletics needs to be taken? How do we kind of right the ship and make sure that we land in a good place for athletes?
That's a great question. I think the number one issue right now is education. And that comes from multiple different perspectives, from students, from the schools, to coaches, to fans, to even the brands themselves. Everyone needs more education on NIL. And the reason I say that is because NIL passed, and although it's not a new term, it's a new term to the college sports industry. And so while everyone sees it as a positive in the sense of everyone as student athletes, they're like, yeah, I can make money. And they're just seeing it as I can make money, but they don't understand what exactly that means or how to obtain that. They just see dollar signs, but they don't understand the business behind NIL. Because there's more than just, okay, that means just give me the brand deals. No, that's where I've seen a lot of issues with student athletes, because I know, especially at a mid-major school like mine, there is not a lot of interest from athletes to participate. And I think that comes from multiple reasons, in the sense of lots of athletes still have that mindset that I'm just here to play my sport. There's still a lot of athletes out there that don't see the benefit of NIL. There's new athletes. I've talked to lots of freshmen, and they just don't even know what it is. They hear it, they understand it, like, oh, that's cool. How do I do it? And my answer is always, well, how much time do you have? Because the issue with NIL is that, yes, you can do it, but there's just not enough resources for the athletes. And that's a whole other conversation. But the sense is, if you're a student athlete, I'm going to put this in the POV. So let's say we're all a student athlete. Okay, we want to do NIL. Well, first, I think the most important step is personal branding. Lots of the NIL deals come through social media. So do you even have your personal brand set up? Are you active on social media platforms? What platforms are you on? Do you post consistently? Okay, do you even know how to post content? So now you're spending time creating content, making content that aligns with your personal brand so it's consistent, and you're showing up every single day. That's one thing you're doing. The second thing you're doing is, okay, now that you have your social media content set up, you're pitching yourself to brands actively. So you're spending time DMing brands on Instagram. You're reaching out to them through cold reach on email. You're reaching out through, I've even reached out to brands on LinkedIn before, which you won't hear common because that's just something I do. And you're trying all
very
that.
well. I've seen some of your posts, so you're very
Thank you.
active in this space.
But you're trying everything you can to even marketplaces to obtain deals. So that's another part of your time you're spending as an athlete. And then those are already 2 full-time jobs that you have people that dedicate all their time in a full-time position to do. But on top of that, you're still a student and an athlete. So lots of it also comes down to the matter of fact of how much time do you have in a day. So some athletes see it as, I just don't have time for it. But the other side too is, even if you do have time for it, how effective can you be in actually creating content, pitching yourself to brands? I know I've spent over a year and a half being my own personal NIL agent. It's good to have your own agent, but the issue now is anyone can be an NIL agent. There's no qualifications that differentiates one person from being an agent versus another. And I've had issues with I've had 3 agents now where they tell me one thing, but then I get something else. They don't explain the contract right, and then I get stuck in a situation. Lots of athletes don't understand litigation in the sense of they don't know how to read contracts. So they get stuck in contracts that include the term perpetuity, and they don't understand what that means. And so there's a lot of common terms in the industry of NIL that lots of athletes don't understand. That comes back to the point of, we need more education, not just for the athletes, but provide them resources.
Yeah, I completely agree. Education has been it's been a there's been a big gap, I think, in terms of the education going into NIL in general, and then making sure that athletes do understand just very basic contract terms, agents. I'm also wondering from your perspective, because, I know very well the demands of an athlete and how limited your time is and how limited your attention span is. From your perspective, how do you begin to sort of engage athletes in this current landscape, to get them the education that they need on the one hand, and also, what do you think the appetite is for athletes to start becoming their own advocates in terms of understanding the landscape well enough to try to move it in a direction, whether that's through collective bargaining or other sorts of advocacy?
Right. I think it starts with showing them the opportunities that come with it. I've seen more opportunities with NIL than anything else I've done. I know as a student athlete, you don't have time for an internship. And so by participating in NIL by yourself, you're learning all these different skill sets that you otherwise would not pick up. And one way that you can initiate to start leaning more into NIL, I was selected to be part of Meta's empowerment program last year, which is an initiative where out of 1,000 applicants, I was chosen as one of 30 female collegiate athletes across the nation. And they led us through a 5-month course where we had 3 coaches and a career coach, and we got to have one-on-one mentorship with them. And they taught us how to utilize Meta, how to get deals, how to do all these different things. And so when you really see the opportunities that come from NIL and having one-on-one mentors to not just tell you like, do this, do this, do this. They show you the opportunities and help you see the potential so that you want to do it yourself. That's where athletes really lean in, because as much as you can show them all the resources, they also have to be engaged. I'm also part of the NIL Student Athlete Advisory Committee at my school. And one of my jobs is, how do I get the student athletes at my school more interested in NIL? I've come up with a couple cool creative ideas to just at least pique their interest in NIL by providing it to them in different ways that they didn't realize NIL is, because everyone just sees it as getting money, or they see the skewed vision of it's just the quarterback that makes $1 million. I can't get any money as a mid-major school or as a track athlete. I'll be honest, I know I'm a track athlete. No one watches track unless it's the Olympics. Even then, I'm a thrower. So the amount that people watch a sport like mine is very limited. So how do you utilize an uncommon sport to your potential? I think that really comes down to the personal branding of how do you position your community and engagement and present that to brands and say, hey, I am valuable because X, Y, and Z.
Yeah, and I think you hit on a very important piece of NIL, which is that it is an opportunity. It's an opportunity that takes work, but it's also done a tremendous amount, I think, to get a lot of women's sports, especially on the map, and a lot of athletes who previously did not get as much attention because their schools didn't market them the same way. And I think that's the piece of NIL that I think is really wonderful, is this opportunity for enterprising athletes and people who are willing to put in the work, because it is work, can really set themselves up very well. And it's why personally I think I would like to see this phase of time last a little bit longer before we see a major upheaval, that we probably will following House. And so I kind of want to bring it to Julie. If you could kind of talk a little bit about the House, the amended House settlement that's been preliminarily approved, and maybe address, does it fix anything that we're sort of dealing with, and what are some of the other implications? I know you focus on Title IX, and there's certainly a lot of issues that I see with it, in terms of the distribution to male versus female athletes, and a few other things. So I'll throw it to you for that.
Sure, I'll try and summarize a couple of the issues and problems I see with it. But and to answer your general question about the current landscape, I feel like we're we started out a few years ago, everybody calling it the Wild West, then it turned into pure chaos, and now I kind of feel like we're in our Lord of the Flies moment, where we have all sorts of crazy things happening. It's probably going to get crazier, and court cases and judges and juries, they're great for dislodging longstanding policy, but they're really not great at creating comprehensive, sustainable, smart policy. And what a judge like Judge Wilkin has in front of her is an entire ecosystem of college sports that she's making, very narrow decisions on. And we saw her want to go very narrow in that hearing, right? A few weeks ago, and not want to really hear the Title IX issue. So she's focused on antitrust, and it has huge implications for everybody. I'll point out a couple of the issues that were interesting to observe in the last week or two. So we know that particular case has to do with past NIL damages and broadcast share revenue. We have two parts to that case: the backwards looking past damages for college athletes going back to 2016 to 2024. That's about 2.7 billion in damages. After attorney's fees, significantly take a chunk out of that, take that down maybe 2.4, right? 2.5 or less. And then for NIL damages and past athletic services claims. And then the forward-looking part, which of course is the future revenue sharing part for current and future college athletes. It's a 10-year looking period, which is really significant for college sports. And that's the permissive, you'll hear plaintiffs' attorneys call it revenue sharing, but is it true revenue sharing? It's a permissive 22% cap, essentially, or $22 million cap that athletic departments, should they choose, should they be able to find a way to afford it, will pay that to their athletes. What I thought was interesting in the last couple of weeks was at the hearing, there was back and forth on the Title IX issue and release of claims. So the plaintiffs' attorneys were very clear about release of claims not affecting the Johnson case for the employment case in the Third Circuit, and not affecting the Ivy League scholarship case for athletes seeking scholarship at Ivy Leagues. And the conversation went back and forth on Title IX releases about whether or not it would be for past damages or should they have a venue. This is not the time or place to do it, but they can take it up in another venue another time. We're not dealing with that here. And Judge Wilkin seemed to go along with that sentiment. What's interesting about the supplemental brief that was filed, it said all Title IX releases, there was a release of claims for all Title IX claims, just like the employment and the Ivy League. But when you look at the actual settlement, it said all Title IX claims are released, but for the past due damages, which is a really big but for, right? So the only people we're limiting in this settlement agreement, the actual written agreement that they'll be signing if it gets passed eventually, they're only limiting women, right? So that's significant. And just like Sabrina said, I think education is a big part of this. We should be educating college athletes about how significant that is, particularly women. And the other, there's options they have in that, right? We have the objection filed by Attorney Hosfeld, by Attorney Mullo, which is going to be interesting to see how those evolve. But college athletes should, be educated on exercising their rights. Do they want to opt out of the settlement? Do they want to see that tweaked if we are indeed headed towards a final settlement? Trustees of schools have a fiduciary duty to their school. They also have a fiduciary duty to the women in their schools. So it's interesting because the forward-looking revenue sharing that schools will be doing, many believe that they're going to do the same breakdown. And to show exactly what that breakdown is, it's 75% of the past damages will go to football players, 15% go to men's basketball players, 5% go to women's basketball players, and the remaining 5% to other sports not restricted by gender. So it's a really big difference between what men's basketball players will get, what women's basketball players will get. And many believe that schools are in fact replicating that for their budgets moving forward, which in 2024, we saw the women surpass the men in viewership by over 4 million viewers. That's after only 2 years of being given permission to use the March Madness trademark, right? It was always the women's tournament. That's really significant. So it doesn't seem like a really good financial deal for the women, and they should be educated on that. And of course, what Christina was talking about, will be interesting to see if this evolves in any way, but the proposed allocation for FBS schools compared to FCS schools. And on the proposal, the power conference schools will be responsible for 675 million, or about 40% of the damages, and all other NCAA Division I schools will be responsible for 990 million, or around 60%. So the issue there is that the power conference schools account for 80% of athletic revenues, while of course the other Division I schools account for less than 20, but that burden they're going to be carrying is much larger. So it'll be interesting to see how that continues to evolve. Yeah, I think, I appreciate the efforts to organize athletes. That's obviously a form of educating athletes. And you also look at some of the organizing efforts who purport to represent all college athletes, but no one's speaking up on these issues. And I appreciate your sensibility, Maddie, in your efforts, because I think, unlike you, there aren't many speaking up about, oh, wait a second, this isn't fair to the women. They've, been working in this unfair environment for decades now. And despite that, they're showing their success. They're showing there's a market out there. And now's the time to start to right that and give them that opportunity to rise up as well. And I don't think the way it is right now, I don't think this settlement does that.
And yeah, you mentioned the increasing viewership of the women's tournament. We've seen volleyball take an uptick. Gymnastics has really taken off. There have been so many women's sports that now are much more visible on so many more platforms. And one of the objectors, previously that wasn't totally heard because Judge Wilkin didn't really want to hear the Title IX issues and whatnot, but there was mention of the fact that the future, the distribution of future earnings wasn't accounting for the fact that historically women's sports have not been promoted the same way. And so to take a snapshot right now may not accurately represent what the real potential is of women's sports and the ability to generate revenue. We certainly know that, the NCAA did not make efforts to really make money off of the women's tournaments due to previous broadcasting contracts and the way that they negotiated rights of certain sports. But all that being said, David, I want to toss it to you because, you've written and spoken a lot about different models and theories of how sports can kind of move forward. Obviously, given the House settlement and this focus on football, there have been a lot of, I think, discussions amongst leaders within college sports about, how to make the most of the House settlement in terms of the ability to give money to football players and make sure that any NIL monies or revenue sharing is going to be predominantly going there. I'm wondering what your thoughts are on some of the different models that are being discussed right now, obviously with conference realignment, the potential of a super league in football, Project Rudy, and then you have the college student football league that have all been sort of mentioned as different potential models moving forward.
Well, what I will say, Maddie, is I like that there is some discussion, because I do think that we have to do a lot of different things. I really, I appreciate what Christina says. We have to sit down and have some real serious discussions about where we go. And we all know the Einstein statement of the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and thinking that we're going to have a different result. We really have to think outside the box. And again, and I don't want to call Christina an idealist, because I certainly believe in so many of the things she's saying, but I'm also saying that even from the educational relationship, Maddie, education is not something that's clearly defined. Education can be procured in so many different ways. You see people who are uber successful who've never gone to college, and now with the gig economy, there's so many things. And I think, if we're going to continue to have our main elite development system in most of our sports being through the educational, primary, secondary, and higher education systems, which is unlike any other country in the world, right? We have to understand that we're the only country that does this. If we're going to continue to do that, then I think we need to also reframe the educational relationship, because clearly, especially at the elite level, maybe not at the Monmouth University or Ohio University level where I'm at, but certainly at the higher level, athletics is the priority, okay? Education is not. And we have consistently watered down education. I could get into clustering and all the other things, all the academic scandals, because athletics has taken the priority. So why don't we reframe that relationship? And I have a book coming out next year, and I'm going to be proposing, I don't think it's radical, but most of you know that I am a veteran, but something that I call a college athlete GI Bill. Why not let a college athlete go to college as an employee of the institution, right? And then part of their compensation is they can get their education at any time they want. And it doesn't even have to be at the institution that they're going to. Give them educational credits based upon part of their compensation package. If you want to go to school part-time, full-time while you're playing, you can do that as an employee and get tuition benefits that most institutions provide. Or you can do it when you want to on your timeline, very similar to what is done in Europe. I teach in Europe all the time at many universities, and I have professional athletes in my classes. Do it on your timeline, but doing what you want to do, the education that you desire. If you want to go to a trade school, if you want to go to the Culinary Institute, you can do that. Or if you want to go to grad school, whatever it may be, that the education will be there for you. We should be more concerned that the access to a real education is there, not a manufactured one, just so we can keep somebody eligible. I know it sounds counterintuitive, Maddie, but saying that somebody has to be a full-time student does not mean that they're actually a student athlete. What that means is that they're essentially an employee and we're telling them what to do instead of giving them access to a real and desired education. So I think we need to look at different models on the education side and also on the other side. I'm not saying Project Rudy is perfect, but I do think something like that is eventually going to happen. And we need to go that direction. And then places like Ohio University and Monmouth and Belmont compete at a level you can afford and sustain. And guess what? Championships at those levels are just as important. I always bring this up. I'll close with this, Maddie. I always tell people, ask people this question. Who were the national football, college football champions in 1960? It's kind of a trick question, but 1960, the national champions, Ohio University. Ohio University was the national football champions. Now, the trick question to that is that we were the small school champions. There were no divisions except big schools and small schools. We celebrate that championship to this day, as big as any BCS, Final Four, or anything. It's a championship, and it was a championship at a level we could afford and sustain. That's what other colleges and universities can do. Maybe the Belmonts and Monmouths and Ohio universities of the world are more of an educational model, right? Maybe a clear separation. We have more of a commercial model. We really need to think of those things. And I think there's many ways to do it, but trying to do the same thing, right? Trying to say it's amateur and student athlete and all that doesn't fly anymore. Let's reframe the paradigm and go forward.
Yeah, and I definitely tend to agree with it's time for each institution to figure out what their values are. I think that's been needed for a while where you know, it's figure out what you would like to stand for and what your model is and what makes sense. Um, we are running out of time, and I do want to give everyone a chance to kind of give a final word and maybe pick up on anything that you've heard. I wish there was more time because there's so many great nuggets that were put out there, but maybe we could go back in the same order if people want to jump in with thoughts, but maybe a minute each to kind of give final thoughts.
Well, I guess since I'm open, I'll just say real quick, just again, by closing, again, it was great being on the panel with everyone. And, what I've learned over the years is that, there are different ways. I spend a lot of time in Europe. I see a lot of different sport development models that we can at least do portions of in America. We can still keep our educationally based sports system, but we just have to change it and look at it differently. And in the end, are we still going to watch the games? And the answer is yes, we are still going to watch the games. Does that mean that maybe we have to do elite development for some sports outside of the educational system? Absolutely. And as a nation, we have to address that. Can we still have educationally based sports? Absolutely. But should education then be the priority? Should we really have non-traditional seasons and things like that? Should it be more of an extracurricular activity? Let's look at those things at for different like institutions and go forward. And I think we can have a very successful sport development model or models, as I often say, going forward for America at all levels.
Yeah, and I agree. And maybe it's time for sport specific models because obviously there are tremendously different needs for a football versus soccer versus women's lacrosse, which I played, and I think if maybe some of that had been considered in some of the conference realignment, you might have a model that makes more sense where maybe you have more localized competitions for some of the Olympic sports, but you maybe move just football or some other similar model. So I want to open it back up for final thoughts to weigh in.
I'll jump in. I think one of the things that I've seen in my work is that we've got to break down some barriers and some silos on campus. Athletics is too often viewed as an auxiliary enterprise that doesn't affect the core mission and vision of the campus, but it is so important to recruitment, retention, enrollment, alumni engagement, brand awareness, and academics tend to put it at arm's length, and we need to bring it together because we need smarter people discussing some of these very issues.
Definitely agree. You can see an uptick in applications every time, a smaller school has an NCAA men's basketball tournament berth. It's clearly tied to the financial stability of the institution. Michael, you have final thoughts? We may be running out of time. I see Bob has popped up.
You're on mute, Michael.
There's an election coming up. Oh, sorry. There's an election coming up. We're less than 30 days now, and that's going to make a big difference on the direction that we go in. I'm a pro-labor person. I'm pro-employment status. And I do believe that collective bargaining and employment status are coming. And now that House is out of the way, that's where the NCAA and the members are going to be going. They're going to be trying to get some type of congressional help in terms of stopping college athletes from becoming employees and being able to collectively bargain.
Right. Christina, glass half full perspective.
I will just add that I think this is the panel shows exactly what I would encourage in a room, right? You're bringing different perspectives. You've got pro, you've got con, you've got track and field, volleyball, women's lacrosse, and I'm sorry if I missed football and wrestling. I know Bob has that, but different perspectives. Wrestling from Dave, different perspectives. I think that's the piece here that I think we can walk away with is that if it's just you making these decisions, I think we need different perspectives, different seats, different experiences. That's that diversity and then inclusion of bringing people to the table. This is not an easy answer. And we're not, there is no easy solution in any of this. And I think if we continue to remember that this is going to be ongoing and we continue to hack at it, find different solutions, go not just stay within the continental US and get out and figure out how other people are doing it and find it the best way that we can approach it. That's my glass half full perspective. Thanks, Maddie.
So
And then
oh, go ahead.
I'll close us out just saying that all these perspectives are really great. And I think especially with athletes, they don't particularly have perspective. And so just to close out this whole conversation for everyone listening, either have a perspective or go and learn more about the topic. I think that's my encouragement for you guys today.
Definitely, I think there's more we can do with educating athletes on where things are and how the policies affect them. And I think that's going to be really important moving forward if they're to have a bigger voice as well. So, but I want to thank everyone. This was a great conversation. I wish we had more time, but we have a bunch more amazing panels that'll be great to listen to. So I hope everyone sticks around, and thank you again, everyone, for participating.
Thank you all, and thank you, Maddie. Best to you as the storm approaches. We have about a 1-minute break, and we'll be in our next panel. So our next one will be on the future of coaches and their relationship. So thank you all.
Thank you.